All right, guys. How's everyone doing? This is just Dr. Martin here. I'd like to go over a few things, and a good man is hard to find. Some of these questions are going to be on the quiz, and I just want to make sure y'all are, um, I guess, aware of how to analyze literature in a good and straightforward way. So, what I want to focus on is this really interesting story by Flannery O'Connor, A Good Man is Hard to Find. A story about morality, about existentialism, about the idea that our places where we live can impact who we are and how we view the world. Okay. And I want to focus briefly in a series of 15-minute videos about some of these themes. Today, I want to talk about foreshadowing. Flannery O'Connor was a brilliant Southern writer. You've probably heard of her before. And the reason why she's so good is not only for her deft use of characters, but also because of her ability to foreshadow. This is a story about death. It becomes very early on, if we're reading keenly and with a deft eye, that something is going to befall the grandmother, Bailey, and the family. The idea of death is all around us in the story. It is foreshadowed early on. Okay. If we go down here, page 34, we see the first instance of death. She didn't intend for the cat to be left alone in the house for 3 days because he would miss her too much. And she was afraid he might brush against one of her gas burners and accidentally asphyxiate himself. So even though the narrator is discussing the grandmother's desire not to have the cat dead, this idea of death is immediately implanted in our minds. In a story that is so fixated on death, this becomes important, okay? So the story progresses. The family is going on this trip. Notice how the grandmother is kind of a bad apple, right? She wants everything her way, and that's going to be prominent later on in the story when she gets them to go the complete opposite direction down a dirt road, and they end up encountering the misfit and company. But now let me keep finding some more details of foreshadowing here. We keep going down, we keep going down, we keep going down. Here is perhaps one of the most important moments of foreshadowing. The grandmother offered to hold the baby, and the children's mother passed him over the front seat to her. She set him on her knee and bounced him and told him about the things they were passing. She rolled her eyes and screwed up her mouth and stuck her leathery, thin face into his smooth, bland one. Occasionally he gave her a faraway smile. They passed a large cotton field with five or six graves fenced in the middle of it like a small island. Look at the graveyard, the grandmother said, pointing it out. That was the old family burying ground that belonged to the plantation. So it's no coincidence that they're passing a graveyard with the exact number of graves as people in the car, as family members. This becomes incredibly important as we keep thinking about the idea of death in the story. Okay? Farther down, after they pass Red Sammy, who mentions that the misfit was in there, or implies the misfit was in there. They doesn't say the misfit, but implies that a shadowy type figure was visiting. All right? There's a specific town that I want to call your attention to, Toomsboro. Let's see if I can find it. There we go. They drove off again in the hot afternoon. The grandmother took cat naps and woke up every few minutes with her own snoring. Outside of Toomsboro. All right? So the name is ominous. Toomsboro. It literally sounds like tomb. Okay? Another instance of foreshadowing. It lets us know that something is going to happen. It's kind of the author's way of being like, hey, right? Something is going to happen. And of course, something does happen. They encounter the misfit. All right. Now, I'm not going to go over characterization in this. I'm going to go over characterization in Hills Like White Elephants, which we'll talk about in the next video. But so they encounter the misfit, and at this point, you're probably wondering, if you're reading the story, if you've read the story, what the deal is with the misfit. Now, the misfit is one of the most iconic characters in all of American literature. Who does he stand for? What is he? Is he good? Is he bad? The title of the story is A Good Man is Hard to Find, which on one hand hints at the fact that, yes, is it hard to find good people? On the other hand, it's asking us, like Hawthorne does in um, uh, why am I completely Young Goodman Brown, about the nature of morality. Is the good possible? Is such a thing as good even possible? Where do we get our morality? And I want to focus on one passage in particular that is on the quiz. All right, so wink, wink. That can be a bit confusing, and I want to break this down, right? All right, so we go through. Bailey and the kids have just been killed in the woods. The mother's been killed in the woods. The grandmother keeps saying, "But you're a good man. You're a good man," to the misfit. And the misfit says, "No, no, ma'am, I ain't a good man." He keeps saying this, right? Notice what he's wearing too, all black, kind of like a devilish figure, which should remind you of the devilish figure in Young Goodman Brown, right? But what I want to get to here is the first instance of existentialism, of this idea that you can't escape who you are. It's not possible, okay? He says in this passage, "Turn to the right, it was a wall," the misfit said, looking up again at the cloudless sky. "Turn to the left, it was a wall. Look up, it was a ceiling. Look down, it was a floor. I forget what I'd done, lady. I sat there and sat there, trying to remember what I'd done, and I ain't recalled it to this day. Once in a while, I would have thought it was coming to me, but it never came." So clearly, this is an entrapped figure. He can't escape who he is or what he feels, right? One of the tenets of existentialism states that there is no meaning. Life is devoid of meaning, okay? One action is just as good as the next. And this will become important here when we get to the idea of what he says about Jesus. But this is important, the idea, if one action is the same as the next, then it doesn't matter what you do. And until you realize that, you will always be entrapped. The misfit is starting to understand that it doesn't matter what he does. And by acknowledging that, he is free. All right, so what I want to get to, though, is this very famous passage by Jesus. She says, the grandmother pleads with, she says, "Jesus will help you. Jesus will help you. Jesus will help you." And in one of the most famous retorts in English literature, he says, "Yes'm," the misfit said as if he agreed. "Jesus thrown everything off balance. It was the same case with him as with me, except he hadn't committed any crime, and they could prove I had committed one because they had the papers on me. Of course," he said, "they never showed me my papers. That's why I sign myself now. I said long ago, you get a signature and sign everything you do and keep a copy of it. Then you'll know what you done. And you can hold up the crime to the punishment and see do they match. And in the end, you'll have something to prove you ain't been treated right. I call myself the misfit," he said, "because I can't make what all I done wrong fit, what all I gone through in punishment." And the old lady keeps saying, "Jesus, Jesus, you got good blood. Pray to Jesus, pray to Jesus." And he says, "Jesus was the only one that ever raised the dead," the misfit continued, "and he shouldn't have done it. He threw everything off balance. If he did what he said, then it's nothing for you to do but throw away everything and follow him. And if he didn't, then it's nothing for you to do but enjoy the few minutes you got left the best way you can, by killing somebody or burning down his house or doing some other meanness to him. No pleasure but meanness," his said, and his voice had become almost as strong. "No pleasure but meanness." Now, this is kind of a complex passage, and I want you to think about where we get our ideas of right and wrong from. Well, in Judeo-Christian morality, we get our ideas of right and wrong from the Bible, from the commandments, from the Torah, okay, from the Quran. if we want to think about the Abrahamic religions. All of this comes from the teachings of Jesus. So what this is saying is, if Jesus actually did what he said he did, if he had the ability to raise the dead, if he is godlike, then we have no choice but to follow whatever he said, which means we have a codified set of what's right and wrong. It is wrong to murder because the commandment said that. Jesus is standing in for all of religion. But, and this is a big but, if Jesus didn't do what he said, if in effect all of religion is fraudulent, then that means our sense of right and wrong cannot stem from the Judeo-Christian tradition. Thus, there is no right and wrong, right? If Jesus did not do what he said he did, then Jesus is a phony, which means the Bible is a phony, which means our sense of morality is fraudulent. And there's nothing to do in a place that has no right or wrong than to do what you want to do. If that means for you burning somebody's house down, then do it. If that means killing somebody, then do it. Now, I'm not saying to do that. What the story is getting us to question is whether or not there is a fixed universal morality. Is there a strict right or wrong? And again, for the misfit, if Jesus was who he was, then yes, there is a system of right and wrong because he embodies that system. He embodies religion. But if he was just a random dude on the street, a cult-like figure that really didn't do the miracles that were ascribed to him, then we have no choice but to have no sense of morality. There is no sense of right or wrong. So this becomes a story about questioning that system of right and wrong. Does it exist? And if it does not exist, then the only things we have are our actions. That's it. And if you want to do good things with those actions, then that's great. If you want to do bad things with those actions, that's equally great. Because ultimately, if Jesus did not do what he said he did, then life is meaningless. All right. On that dark note, I'll leave y'all to get to it. We'll talk about characterization in another video with Hills Like White Elephants. Hopefully this illuminated some things, and always send me your questions at jmartin@highlands.edu. Thank you very much and have a nice day.